Hello, and welcome to episode 94 of WrestleErotica, the podcast that combines wrestling with the erotica. This week we have two stories to share with you. The first story is entitled One Night Stand. After a devastating match with Beth Phoenix, all Melina wants to do is take a shower and relax. However, she is surprised that her opponent, Beth, has other ideas for the two. The second story is entitled, If I Was Your Vampire. In this story, Maria Kanellis is visiting ECW on a rare trip. She doesn't realize that she is followed by Shelly Martinez, otherwise known as Ariel. After a while, Maria is surprised to realize that she is completely and totally at the will of Shelly. Without further ado, let's get to this week's stories. This story is entitled One Night Stand, and it was written by Hill Princess. Melina had just been through one of the most intense matches of her career, and now she wanted to grab a shower and head back to the hotel for some rest. She was more than a little sore, and the simple thought of the warm water cascading down her back seemed heavenly. Grabbing a towel, she was about to head for the showers when the locker room door flew open. She looked up to see Beth Phoenix, the woman who moments ago she was in a heated battle with. "Oh, hey, Beth," she said, smiling, continuing what she was doing by taking her street clothes out of her locker. Beth's mouth drew up in a grin in response to the Latina. She didn't say a word. She just moved closer to the woman. The brunette didn't budge. Beth was awkwardly close to her. She decided to try and break the uneasy moment with a compliment on their wrestling. "That was a hell of a match," she told her nervously, swallowing the lump in her throat. She could feel Beth's breath on her face, and the short amount of distance between them made her less than comfortable. "You think so?" the blonde questioned, finally breaking her silence. "I just hope I wasn't too rough with you." Shaking her head violently, Melina responded, No, it was great." "So you like it rough then?" Beth retorted, laying a hand above the woman's head on the cold locker, purposely directing her words into Melina's ears. She was completely taken back by the woman's words. The way they dripped with sexual innuendo. Melina knew it was best to pretend she wasn't getting to her, and shot back with a stiff, unaffected comment. "What's this about, Beth?" She spat, folding her arms over her chest in protest, and partially to create at least a little distance between them. The blonde laughed at the fiery temperament of the woman. She knew that she was making her uncomfortable, because you only bite back when threatened. "Well," she began, trailing a finger gently up Melina's arm, "I couldn't help but notice how flexible you are." She moved her finger from her bare skin to brush the hair from the Latina's face. "I mean, we all see your little entrance every week," Beth said with a laugh. "But damn, I had you contorted pretty good out there." Melina tried her hardest not to show weakness. She didn't want Beth to know that she was getting to her, and she especially didn't want her to know that right about now she wanted nothing more than to kiss the lips that were so close to her face. No, she couldn't give in. "You're out of your mind!" she shouted, trying to push past her. But Beth wasn't allowing her to get away that easy. She quickly moved her free hand up the other side of Melina's head, virtually pinning her to the locker. "Come on now! Don't be like that!" she cooed, blowing her breath down Melina's neck, then over her collarbone, causing the woman to shiver. "I could tell you were enjoying being in my arms out there, and seeing how vocal you were in that kind of pain made me think." Beth slightly removed one of her hands from the locker, confident that Melina wouldn't try to leave, and placed a finger to her lip in mock thought. "What kind of amazing sounds would you make an immense pleasure? The Latina couldn't believe what she was hearing, and for the first time in a long time, she was utterly speechless. There was no fighting the fact that Beth was extremely beautiful, but having her come on to her had her at an absolute loss of words. "Cat got your tongue, Mel?" Beth asked with a smirk, and when Melina didn't respond, she took it upon herself to keep the moment flowing. "Not going to tell me? Okay. Well, I'll find out for myself then." And with that, she feverishly pushed her lips to Melina's. She didn't want to give in to Beth, but she couldn't help it, because feeling her hot breath against her own mouth and her hand travel up her side and to her breast made her weak with desire. Melina reluctantly opened her mouth to give Beth access. The blonde smiled at the action, and it took her mere seconds to swirl her tongue with the brunette. It was a torrid kiss, completely unlike anything Melina had ever felt in her life. As much as she hated to admit it to herself, the feeling of Beth's warm tongue mixing with her own was driving her crazy, and the added sensation of the Glamazon kneading her breast with her palm was enough to drive her straight into bliss. Melina tried to wrap her arms around the woman, but Beth wouldn't allow it. No! No! She had to be completely in control. It was making the brunette crazy, because even though minutes ago she wanted her far away from her, she now felt that their bodies couldn't be close enough. She wanted her body pressed against her own. She longed to feel Beth's soft skin against hers. "Patience, patience," Beth repeated, breaking the kiss to press her mouth to Melina's neck, gently grazing her teeth across the sensitive flesh to make the brunette gasp in approval. Satisfied that she was about to have her way with the brunette, Beth decided to stop her teasing of the woman and give her what she was obviously craving. Trailing her hand down her breast, she quickly darted her hand against her heat, both surprised and pleased at the warmth she felt there. "Beth!" Melina moaned, gluing her eyes shut at the pleasure of the contact. "I love when you say my name," Beth panted in anticipation, releasing the ragged breath that she didn't even realize she had been holding in. Her hand began to move faster, to feverishly rub Melina's womanhood through the soft fabric of her ring attire. The pleasure was almost too much to handle, and the Latina could barely find the strength to stand. She was putty in Beth's hands, and this definitely wasn't what she pictured happening after their match. But if Beth stopped now, she'd fight her harder than she had in the ring. Melina wanted her. She needed her. She craved her, and she couldn't bear it if she didn't find release from the woman. "Oh, God!" she moaned louder, throwing her head back and gluing her eyes shut, as Beth continued to push her to the edge. Beth could tell that Melina was having a hard time holding herself up, so she decided to help steady her by sliding one of her legs around her own waist in support. "Come on, Mel! Come for me!" Beth urged her, stopping her assault momentarily to slip her hand inside the woman's costume. As soon as the blonde's hand found her bare flesh, Melina knew it wouldn't be long until she found satisfaction on her fingers. A sharp hiss escaped her throat as Beth drove 2 fingers into her wetness. "Yes! God, yes!" Melina grunted, riding Beth's hand to find her orgasm. But just as she was about to drive into euphoria, Beth began to circle her swollen nub with her thumb, which completely overwhelmed the Latina. "Bah!" she screamed, arching against the blonde before collapsing to her chest in complete ecstasy. The Glamazon's lips found Melina's once more in a passionate kiss. She enjoyed seeing Melina like this, completely submissive to her. Beth commented. "The sounds were even better than I expected." Melina smiled up at her, trying desperately to catch her breath. She was more beat out than she was after the grueling match in the ring. "Wow!" she panted. "I was not expecting that. I'm a very shocking woman." Beth said with a grin. The brunette's eyebrows raised. Well, I need a shower badly. Care to join me for some more shocking activity? Gladly, the blonde replied, following Melina to the back of the locker room, shedding her own ring attire as she went. The end. This story is entitled, If I Was Your Vampire. And it was written by fanfiction.net user Where I've Gone. Maria walked through the backstage area of the arena, waving to all the ECW wrestlers that she really didn't see on a regular basis. This was actually the first time she had been to an ECW taping, and she had to admit she was having fun hanging out backstage, dodging into an open room to watch the current match on one of the many backstage monitors. Maria was totally unaware that she was being followed. She did, however, hear as the door closed, and turned in time to see Shelly, known to the wrestling world as Ariel, a predatory smirk on her lips, locking the door. My. What do we have here? Shelly asked, licking her full, freshly glossed lips. Maria hesitated. I was, just gonna leave. She stammered, obviously intimidated by the ECW vixen, who still had a slender finger over the lock on the doorknob. Shelly smiled, almost feeding off of the razor-like tension flowing through the air, most obviously created by fear. Why not stick around? Talk with me a bit, Shelly said, her tone making it clear that it was an order, not a question. You know, I've foreseen some very interesting things in your future, Maria, she said. Really? Maria asked, swallowing a lump that had formed in her throat. On top of the fear, she was also feeling guilt. She knew she really had no choice but to stay, but it almost felt like she was doing something she knew was wrong, like taking candy from a stranger or something. Shelly conformed. Really interesting things, like fame. She paused, letting her words sink in. Fortune, she continued. Pleasure, she finished, letting her voice drop to a seductive hiss for the utterance of the last word. In fact, she continued, her predatory grin not even faltering, if you come back to my hotel room with me, we can take care of that last thing right now. Maria stepped into the hotel room, her eyes adjusting to the dim light of the single candle Shelly had just lit. Even the older woman's hotel room had been adjusted to fit her dark, alluring personality. The blinds seemed to have been tightly shut, so much so that not even a glimmer of light from the outside world reflected in. The usual hotel bed sheets had been replaced with black satin ones, and the room's AC had been set to a not quite cold, but chilling temperature. Somewhere in Maria's mind, she thought she should be worried, or afraid, or something of the sort. After all, not only had Shelly managed to lure her back to her hotel room, but she had managed to lure her willingly back to her hotel room. It suddenly dawned on Maria that she hadn't even made an attempt to get out of the vixen's irresistible clutches. She had willingly followed her to her car and willingly followed her to her hotel room. And now, here she was standing in front of the ECW vixen, who was currently eyeing her like she was the main course in some kind of 5-star meal. Yet, instead of feeling afraid, she was actually feeling kind of excited. She momentarily wondered if this is what playing with the fire would feel like. The adrenal rush of doing something she knew she wasn't supposed to do mingled with the lustful tension flowing between the two women, and they soon came together in a fervent embrace, their bodies and lips pressed so tightly together. It was almost as if they had merged into one. Shelley managed to maneuver Maria onto her back, on the bed, without for a second even breaking their kiss. Ravenous was the only word Maria had to describe the way Shelley was touching her. Shelley seemed to be devouring her, her tongue hot and questing inside the younger woman's mouth, her fingers trailing a teasing path under Maria's dress and up her thighs. Maria was powerless to do anything but attempt to keep up with the vixen. Shelley's established pace and roaming hands wordlessly dictated her dominance over Maria. And if that wasn't enough, the way she practically tore Maria's dress from her body definitely left no room for doubt. Breaking the kiss, Shelley pressed her body against Maria's, trailing wet kisses down Maria's neck and throat. Her lips grazing over supple flesh, causing small whimpers to erupt past Maria's lips. Without even the tiniest hint of a warning, Shelley sank her teeth into the skin at the junction between Maria's neck and shoulder, causing the unexpecting woman to jerk almost violently forward, the sharp intake of breath coming straight from her lungs, leaving her feeling almost winded. However, the initial sting of the bite was nothing compared to the pleasure she felt as Shelley sucked on the spot, alleviating all but a tiny throbbing she felt there. Pleased with her work and encouraged by Maria's whimpers of approval, Shelley continued her exploration of the body before her, cupping the bra-encased flesh of Maria's breast in her palms. She took a moment to enjoy the heavy weight pressing against her palms before squeezing, feeling as the younger woman arched into her touch. Soon growing tired of the lace material, she unclasped the baby blue bra, dragging the straps down Maria's shoulders before throwing the material carelessly to the side, her lips instantly attaching to newly exposed flesh. Shelley ran a fingertip between the valley of Maria's breast. Her tongue soon followed the path as she made her way down to the brunette's navel before following the path back up to Maria's body. She was tempted to follow the same trail a few more times, thoroughly enjoying the brunette writhing beneath her. But as much as she liked teasing, she knew there'd be plenty of time for that later, and she was growing kind of impatient right now. She cupped the bare flesh of Maria's breast, soon replacing her hands with her lips, as she took a nipple between her lips, teasing the bronze flesh to erectness before doing the same to the other. Maria moaned, her hands unconsciously slipping beneath Shelley's tight, fitted Alberto Vargas shirt, caressing the soft flesh of a taut abdomen. She wanted the shirt off. She felt dirty for wanting it off, but she wanted it off nonetheless, and it seemed that Shelley sensed this, because she soon pulled back, sitting up and straddling the brunette's thighs, as she dragged her black shirt slowly up and off, revealing a lacy black bra, which was also soon off, leaving her nude upper body exposed to wondering eyes. Maria's eyes widened as the raven-haired vixen exposed herself to her. It wasn't like she hadn't seen another woman naked before. In fact, she had seen many women naked before. After all, it was common practice to change in front of each other in the locker room. But somehow, this was so different. She had never been this close before, had never felt butterflies inhabit her stomach as they had now, had never felt a pain of pleasure shoot between her thighs like it had now, and it intrigued her. Shelley watched the brunette's expression carefully, watched as expressions of shock, curiosity, lust, hesitance flickered across her features, felt as her hands traveled up her sides and stilled, noticed as her lips parted to release words that seemed stuck behind beautiful lips. "You can touch them," She leaned down to whisper, huskily, in the brunette's ears. This definitely wasn't her first run around the block with a straight girl, and this part never failed to amuse her. More so with Maria than any other girl she had managed to seduce. Maria's hands continued their movement, taking the weight of 2 heavy breasts in her palm and kneading, an audible sigh leaving her lips as she did so. Shelley allowed her fun for a few moments, watching her carefully as she familiarized herself with the flesh of breast. Growing impatient, she grabbed Maria by her slender wrist and pinned her arms above her head, catching the brunette obviously off guard as she gasped. She trailed her fingernails down Maria's outstretched arms, down her sides, down her thighs, leaving tiny red welts and supple skin. Maria writhed, a desperate whimper leaving parted lips, as Shelley's fingers got closer and closer to where they wanted to touch. Needed them to be. She was ready. So much so that the moment Shelley's fingertips came into contact with her panty-clad center, she arched into the touch, her hips rising right off of the mattress. Shelley pressed her fingertips against the lacy material of Maria's boy shorts, smirking as Maria's thighs and hips twitched, her slender body reacting to her touch. Maria was clearly aroused, her wetness seeping through the baby blue fabric beneath Shelley's fingers. She pressed harder against the garment, her fingers soon tracing circles over the concealed, slick flesh. Maria moaned, her fingers tangling in satin sheets as Shelley teased her. Her eyes fluttered shut, pained exhalations of breath leaving her as Shelley's fingers continued caressing her, her lips soon finding her neck again as she nipped at her flesh. Maria wanted Shelley to take her underwear off. There was no doubt about that. But right now, she was so worked up, so close to the edge, that if Shelley stopped, even to remove the garment, she was sure she'd explode. "Oh my God!" Maria breathed out, Shelley's fingers moving more insistently against her. She was so close, wavering on the edge of bliss, and as teeth sunk into the flesh of her neck, her body stilled. A strangled moan rising from her throat to her lips, as her body fell limp against the mattress. She breathed in deeply, burying her body closer into the mattress as waves of pleasure crashed through her, ending in flooded juices between her thighs. She briefly registered that there was the soft press of lips against her abdomen, and kisses slowly descending to her hip. But it wasn't until she felt fingers hooking her already dampened underwear that she realized Shelley's intentions. Her eyes shot open at the first swipe of Shelley's tongue against her womanhood. It took only a few insistent licks before she was all worked up again, her fingers tangling unconsciously in raven hair, keeping the vixen as close to her as possible. Usually, fingers running through her hair would be warrant for Shelley to stop. After all, she was in control here, and she had placed Maria's hands above her head, which was where she expected them to stay. But, with that being said, she didn't want to stop. She was thoroughly enjoying the flavor of the brunette's sensitive flesh against her tongue, the way the brunette's thighs trembled against her fingertips, the way Maria would moan as her tongue brushed against her clit. It was even mildly cute, the way Maria would suck her bottom lip between her teeth, biting gently, resisting the urge to moan even louder than she was already doing. Shelley rested her hand on Maria's thigh as she continued to pleasure her, the fingertips of her other hand soon finding their way back up Maria's body, momentarily teasing the flesh of the brunette's breast before finally resting 2 fingers against the brunette's full lips. Getting the hint, Maria parted her lips, taking the digits into her warm mouth, sucking gently, releasing the digits only when Shelley silently dictated she do so. Shelley teased Maria's opening with the wet digits, gathering even more wetness on her fingertips. Finally growing tired of teasing the younger woman, She slipped the 2 digits inside her, knuckle deep, before pulling out, curling and thrusting them inside her again, deeper, harder this time, before repeating the process, creating a rhythm that Maria matched with her rocking hips. Maria was close, very close, and as Shelley closed her lips around her clit, sucking hard, she cried out. Her second orgasm of the night, rocking through her. She crashed limply against the mattress, her convulsions drawing Shelley's slender fingers further into her, and she began to thrust progressively slower, allowing Maria to ride out her orgasm, before pulling out of her completely, her tongue trailing down to where her fingers previously were, the sensation causing the brunette's spent body to twitch. Crawling predatorily back up the brunette's body, she wiped the corners of her smirking lips, suggestively, before kissing Maria soundly. Maria was exhausted. She knew that. Hell, it was obvious. But she wasn't done with her quite yet. Stay right there, she whispered huskily into the brunette's ear before getting off of the bed. Maria nodded. It wasn't like she could move anyway, and she really wasn't sure she wanted to move. Her gaze followed the vixen as she crossed the room, dropping the rest of her clothes along the way. She watched closely as she retrieved a black tote bag, bringing it over to the bed as she shuffled through it. She watched curiously as Shelley grinned, obviously finding the thing she was looking for. Maria's eyes widened, her jaw dropping minutely as Shelley pulled the object out of the bag. Shelley chuckled at the brunette's expression. Don't worry, I won't hurt you, she reassured her. A lot, she added menacingly. By no means was she planning on really hurting the brunette, but she also wasn't planning on treating her like some delicate flower. She was sure the brunette's past lovers had treated her as. Fastening the black strap-on to her hips, she moved back over to the bed, her lips attaching to the brunette's once again. Lying back against the mattress, she leaned back, allowing Maria to explore. Not exactly sure what to do, as she started at the body, before her curiously for a moment, before leaning in and capturing the vixen's lips in a passionate kiss. She let her hands wander, trailing fingertips over expanses of smooth skins, smiling into the kiss when she felt Shelley's body react to her touch. Breaking the kiss, Maria laced kisses to the ECW vixen's neck, her tongue darting out every so often to taste the salty sweet flesh beneath her lips. Trailing her hands up a taut abdomen, she finally cupped Shelley's breast in her palms, squeezing the handfuls gently. She could feel the older woman's nipples hardening against her touch, and a pang of arousal shot through her as she continued playing with the flesh. Curiosity getting the best of her, she lowered her kisses, tracing her tongue over the vixen's collarbone, across her cleavage, between the valley of her breast, before finally taking an already erected nipple between her lips and sucking. Shelley moaned contently, her eyes fluttering shut as Maria switched between nipples, her movements becoming more purposeful by the second. Maria continued her path down Shelley's body, her fingertips creating a path down the vixen's abdomen, a path which her lips soon followed. Running her fingertips momentarily over Shelley's thighs, she gripped the black plastic appendage, running her fingertips across it for a moment, her green eyes locking with Shelley's deep brown ones as she lowered her head, taking the tip of the plastic between her lips. At least this was something she knew how to do. Shelley ran her fingertips through soft brunette hair, watching as the brunette's lips caressed the plastic of her favorite toy. At this point, she was really glad she wasn't a guy, because she was sure she'd have melted the moment the brunette walked up at her with those bright green eyes. As the plastic popped soundly out of the brunette's mouth, Shelley signaled for Maria to lie down, which she did without any hesitation. She quickly advanced on the raw diva, capturing her lips in a passionate kiss, her hands working all over the flesh she could reach. Trailing her fingers between the interviewer's thighs, she poised her fingers at her opening before thrusting into her, licking her lips when she realized that Maria was even wetter than she was earlier.
Oh yeah!
She worked the finger inside of her, curling before pulling out, and then thrusting in again before slipping a second finger in and thrusting faster, harder, deeper, filling the brunette's inner wall stretch to receive the intrusion. Maria gasped as Shelley slipped a third finger into her. The sensation almost to the point of pain, but she was so wet it didn't cross that line. Shelley worked her up for a bit longer, finally pulling her fingers out when she felt that Maria was nearing orgasm. And before Maria could even anticipate it, she felt hard plastic pressing into her. A rush of air leaving her lungs as the appendage sunk deep into her. She closed her eyes, her fingernails digging into Shelley's back as she began, thrusting into her, hard and fast, and anything but gentle, but nothing but pleasurable. Her hips rose, meeting the vixen thrust for thrust. Her legs wrapping around Shelley's waist, pulling her closer. She could feel herself teetering on the edge of bliss for the third time that night, as Shelley held on to her hips, thrusting into her with the force Maria could have only imagined coming from such a small woman. One forceful thrust later, Maria felt her body stilling as she fell back against the mattress, a moan so loud leaving her lips
Ooh.
that she was sure it'd be a miracle if they were the only ones who heard it. She could feel Shelley's lips against hers again as the vixen pulled out of her, drawing a last convulsion from her spent body. She was exhausted, absolutely beat, so when Shelley finally lay down next to her, she snuggled into the warm body, her head resting against the ECW Diva's chest. Shelley looked at the brunette for a moment. This was usually the part where she'd go for a walk, and by the time she got back, expect the person to be long gone because she wasn't a relationship kind of person, and an invitation to stay overnight was a relationship in her book. But as she looked down at the brunette, she had to admit, she did look kinda cute resting against her as she was doing. Wrapping her arm around the brunette, Shelley sighed. Just one time wouldn't kill her, right? The end. Thank you for listening to episode 94 of Russell Erotica. We hope that you enjoyed this week's stories. As always, we hope that you like, review, and subscribe to us in iTunes. Thank you for supporting us for 2 years. This has been a really fun project, and without you listeners, we couldn't continue to do this. So, thank you for all the support that you have given me. It's greatly appreciated. If you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to like, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Follow us elsewhere online, including Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and as all of you know it, our official website, WrestleEroticaPod.com. Thank you and have a good week.